Welcome to Rebecca Sounds Reveille. This has been brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project and the TLBTV network. I'm your host, Rebecca Mahan, and I've got to tell you today's a great episode. We have a fantastic guest with us today who is going to be talking with us about Alzheimer's. And what's really exciting about this is this really hits close to home. I know of someone personally who had Alzheimer's, and unfortunately at the time they were not able to really diagnose it as such. Back then things were more looked at as senility or dementia, and maybe even possibly just old age. But there's so much now that we have learned over the years, and it's becoming increasingly apropos to talk about, because it is something that is preventable. And there is a lot of topics out there that say this will do it or that will do it, but really we want to talk to you about how to do it naturally. And so with me today, my guest, Francie Healey, who is author of Eat to Beat Alzheimer's, is here to share her knowledge and her experience directly with this particular disease. And she is a health and wellness counselor that has combined expertise in nutrition and mental health. She has a master's degree in counseling and certification in health counseling. She is also a licensed mental health counselor and certified health counselor. She knows what she's talking about. She's done her research. She's worked with this and now has an opportunity to share with us on how to prevent it. This is absolutely phenomenal for those who are in early onset Alzheimer's, who have this in their family, in their genes, and allegedly, but we'll ask her about that if that is really true or not. And those that want to help others prevent it for themselves. Let's bring her on. With me today, my guest, Francie Healey. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here talking about this important subject and offering hope to those who are concerned about their brain and are concerned about the possibility of one of their loved ones or themselves getting Alzheimer's.
Yes, you know, this is just an area that really needs to be discussed and brought to the table. I'm shouting reveille to this because people do need to wake up and understand how vital this is and how preventable it is. And there's a lot of things that people say out there, this will treat it, that will treat it, but essentially we need to talk about it happening from a standpoint of nutrition. And so I kind of want to know, Francie, how did you get started in working specifically in researching Alzheimer's?
You know, I had been originally working with brain health and the body. And in my private counseling practice, I was working with clients who were experiencing depression and anxiety. And I recognized that nutrition played a role. And so my specialty was food and mood, and looking at how what we eat affects our brain function. And that led me to the research on Alzheimer's and nutrition. And it was actually my father who recommended to me and that I research if there was anything that could be done for people who were concerned about getting Alzheimer's or perhaps had some of the early symptoms of Alzheimer's. He asked me the question one day when he was actually in the hospital, and at the time he was going through his second surgery for cancer, and he was inquiring more about my work. And he said, you know, it's fascinating, the research and the work that you do on the brain and the body and health. And I'm wondering if you know of any research on preventing Alzheimer's or at least slowing the progression of Alzheimer's. He was in his early 60s at the time, and he said many of his peers were very concerned about this. He felt like it was hard to witness some of his friends experiencing Alzheimer's, and felt like it would be a powerful book if I could write it that would offer hope to people that there is a way that we could affect our destiny in terms of our brain health and our brain wellness. And I felt like that was, when he shared that with me, I felt like, wow, I've got to write this. And I told him that I would, and I said that I would dedicate this book to him, and with the vision of offering hope. And so I spent over 3 years going through the research on Alzheimer's and the brain and what was going on in the world of neuroscience and nutrition. And I discovered some interesting information that I distilled in my book so that people could understand it, so that it was accessible, so that it was applicable to everyday life. And what was the most astounding thing that I discovered was that in Alzheimer's, when post-mortem examinations were completed, they discovered that the brain was inflamed, and that that inflammation in the brain is one of the main components that we need to look at in terms of prevention, in terms of taking good care of our brain. And so a big part of this book is focused on inflammation and reducing inflammation in our brain and how to do that in our daily lives.
I love it. And there is so much research now that has indicated that disease is caused by inflammation, internal inflammation, and we don't recognize that. But let me ask you a question. I mean, we don't recognize that as individuals. You know, we just kind of know that we have a symptom, it needs to be treated, and we don't understand what really is going on. But let me ask you a question. It has been said, and there may be something now that would be obviously, you know, that this would be old news, but maybe not. Is this a genetic disease?
That's a really good question, and it is true that there is a gene that indicates whether or not let's say you're at a higher risk. For example, some people look at this, they want to get this test done to look at that gene because they have a family history, particularly when there's a situation in one's family where a loved one has had early onset Alzheimer's. But even though you have, let's say, more of a likelihood or a predisposition, that does not mean that that's going to be expressed. So it can often contribute. It can often contribute to fear, and that's the area that I'm interested in. Is like, how is the fear feeding us, and actually, is the fear depleting us? And is there a way that we can frame this that there is hope by what we do right now? Because what goes on in our brain in terms of neurodegenerative diseases happens decades before any symptoms appear. And so I encourage people to start now investing in their health. And if you decide to get a test to see if you have, let's say, this particular gene that shows that there's an increased chance of getting Alzheimer's, that's a very personal decision, and I recommend that you weigh it with the fear component, whether or not that's going to just simply increase your stress. And again, it doesn't have to be your destiny, and there's things you can do right now that have neuroprotective benefits, and that involves nutrition, and that involves reducing inflammation in your brain. And we can do that right now. So that's a very good question. I get that a lot.
You know, it's very interesting, and there has just been so much. I had years ago read that the Alzheimer's was a specific deficiency in vitamin B12 or one of the B vitamins. Is there any weight in that?
Well, I'm glad you brought up B vitamins. B vitamins are very important for your brain, and they offer neuroprotective properties. And one of the things that we can do right now to protect our brain and to feed our brain is increase our B vitamins. Now, by way of illustration, I feel like this is pretty important to mention, 2% of our body weight comes from the brain, but the brain uses 20% of the fuel we ingest.
Okay.
And it's the hungriest part of the body. So it's important to give it the right nutrition. And that's another way in which B vitamins come into play. And the way that we increase our B vitamins is by including more vegetables, like dark green leafy vegetables, kale and collard greens and spinach, and incorporating that into our daily lives and affirming, this is where the psychology of eating comes in, really affirming and imagining that these vegetables that are high in B vitamins are nourishing our brain, that are actually feeding our brain. There was a study, and I think it's worth mentioning since you brought up the role of B vitamins. There was a study done out of Baltimore, and it found that elderly subjects who ate close to 3 servings of vegetables every day slowed their cognitive decline by 40%.
Oh my gosh, that's huge.
Which is significant. And so the B vitamins, the research is showing that the B vitamins play a role in preventing and alleviating the symptoms of cognitive decline. And so that's really important, and that's something we can do in our daily lives. And then many people say to me, in my private practice, well, I don't particularly like dark green leafy vegetables, or I feel like I would just be forcing myself to eat these vegetables. How do you make them tasty? And when I was putting together the book, that was really important to me, because I work with people on meal planning. I work with people on how to eat well and simply. And there are many ways to cook vegetables that are simple and easy and tasty. Some of the recipes in my book go into offer a lot of suggestions for that. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is notice your own personal biases. Notice if you have an aversion to vegetables, and stay curious and stay inspired about how you can incorporate these vegetables into your daily life and in a tasty way, in a way that keeps you excited, because that's going to create sustainable health habits. Is if you're excited and you're inspired and it's protecting your brain. That way it has more meaning.
I agree with you. And I think that by actually consuming it versus taking it in a supplement form, you're really getting the properties that your body needs.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's like I do think personally that it is a good idea, particularly if you're experiencing a lot of fatigue, you're feeling lethargic, to consider a B complex vitamin. But first try getting good nutrition through the food that you eat, through the vegetables, and see what happens. Start to track it. And the best, again, I agree with you, Rebecca, the best thing to do is try to get, just good quality nutrition through the food that you eat. And then if you need to supplement, then you can do that. But let's first try to get the diet cleaned up. And it's a very empowered place to be when you feel like your diet is clean and clear and nourishing not only your brain, but your body.
Yes, yes, yes. I have to agree with you. And something that you've said, which is, it's very interesting to think about, and that is energy levels. And generally speaking, as we begin to age, and based on also work and other life events, but aging specifically can also change our energy levels because a lot of hormones and things are changing within us. So you'll hear people say, I just don't have the same amount of energy that I used to. And I think that this is huge in understanding that not only does this particular nutrient create a sense of energy, but it's also protecting us from a disease within our brain. And another thing that you mentioned was the amount of nutrients that our brain is consuming in comparison to the rest of our body. I mean, that is immense. This what we think is such a small organ, and yet it's the largest consumer. And I'm just absolutely amazed at the information you're sharing.
Yeah, I found it powerful too, and this brings us back to this topic of inflammation, because since the brain has no pain receptors and it feels no pain, we don't know when our brain is inflamed. Now we know that when our body experiences inflammation, we get pain, we get discomfort. It's pretty clear to us. Our joints might ache, or we might have an acute wound or an infection. So we know that type of inflammation. But to recognize inflammation in the brain is really important. And one of the ways you can recognize it is through some typical symptoms. And that includes fatigue, since we brought this up, right? Fatigue, anxiety, depression. In fact, depression is often an initial symptom of many neurodegenerative disorders. So when the inflammation is chronic, as is in the case with Alzheimer's disease and also many other neurodegenerative disorders, the immune system has absolutely no rest, and it's a war without end. But when we change our diet, what we've discovered through the research is we stop fueling that inflammation, and we literally give our body a chance to experience peace and restoration and regeneration. And so although there's massive changes as we age, particularly in our endocrine system, and there is, we might notice that our priorities start to shift in terms of how we want to use our energy. I also look at it at another level of, well, is it true that because I'm aging that I'm going to be tired all the time? And to me, I'm more curious about what it is in our body that we need to fuel, that we need some extra nourishment, and what is going on in our brain. And so this is why this more invested, proactive approach can be very powerful, because you can start to track and notice, actually, I'm feeling more vital today when I change my diet. And that's something that we can do in our daily life, that we actually have the power to change the trajectory of our health by the very food choices we make.
I agree with you. And there is a plethora of health benefits by diet alone, from anything from weight loss, of course, to other things that we know of. The one question that many may have, and especially those who know that like B12 is a water soluble, and I'm not sure if all of the Bs are, but let's just use that one for an example. If one of the nutrients that I'm getting through kale or my leafy greens is water soluble, how much of it do I need to have really have my body absorb the nutrients that it needs to begin to reduce inflammation?
Well, that's another very good question, because really in addition to the kale and the B vitamins, you're going to want to have, think about it in terms of servings. So I recommend having, start with like lunch and dinner or breakfast and dinner, having, pretty good, think about it in terms of a fistful of vegetables with each of those meals. Now, B12 is an interesting one because of what you just said. And for some people who are, as you know, who are vegetarians or vegans, they're still not going to get enough. So,
okay.
In that case, it'll be very hard for them to get enough. I've noticed this with some of my clients. They do need to supplement with a sublingual B12. Now, one of the ways you can tell if you're not getting enough B12 is that you're eating a lot of your green vegetables. You're reducing inflammatory foods. You're getting good fats, which I'll go into, and you're still feeling quite fatigued.
Okay.
So in that case, I would be curious. I would be curious about B12. So, I just would be curious. Like, I would want to know. Like, I might want to get. I would recommend maybe getting a test done to see what those levels are at. Legumes are also a good source of B vitamins as well. I want to say that. So this is really about tracking. Really tracking. Again, like when you start to make dietary changes, start tracking how you feel. Are you noticing changes? Give it about a month. And tracking it to see, okay, is there something going on here? Like, do I need a little bit more? Because you are correct. Some vitamins through food it may be hard to get enough of, particularly since our soils are depleted.
Yes.
The quality of our soil. So that's another reason why in some cases I'm looking at supplementation, because I'm not sure about the quality of the food or the quality of the soil. It's another big thing.
I have to agree with you on that. And we're seeing a lot of things that are placed in the soil. There's much research on spraying and contamination from glyphosate and a number of other things, and that's really not where our show is going today. But all of these things contribute, when we're consuming them, to the inflammation within our bodies. And I think that what you have done by presenting, you have a measurable amount of things that people can do. So in terms of measurement, you can look at the fatigue that is happening, the symptoms, inner and outward symptoms of what's going on with us, and measuring it along with other things that you've mentioned earlier, and it's also in your book.
So I couldn't hear you very well, but what I think you were asking is, are there other things that we can do in addition to what I just mentioned regarding the brain? Is that I couldn't really hear you.
Oh, that's okay. What I'm saying is that you have given these things that people can look for in terms of measurement. So, for example, earlier you mentioned, try this for 30 days. Monitor it.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell by the symptoms that you're having, specifically fatigue. How much energy are you having? And I think that this is phenomenal. And you have your book, Eat to Beat Alzheimer's, and this is something that is going to be a ripple effect in prevention and other inflammation reduction diseases and ailments that people are experiencing.
Yeah, this is what I often say in some of my talks, is that let's say you don't believe any of this research, right? Let's say you don't believe any of this brain research, and you start to eat in this way, right, where you're reducing inflammatory foods such as processed and refined foods, reducing your sugar intake, increasing good fats, increasing your vegetables, and antioxidants, spices, and herbs. And you do that, the byproduct is reducing inflammation and stronger health in your body. So I like that. I like that that the research is showing not only how to take care of our brain, but also how to take care of our body in a way that helps prevent other inflammatory conditions, and looks at diet in terms of, let's think of diabetes right now, right? 50% of Americans are pre-diabetic. And so in the food we eat actually changes our gene expression, creating more obesity and inflammatory disorders. They're now calling like type 3 diet, like Alzheimer's and diabetes, kind of like the type 3 diabetes of Alzheimer's. Because and I find that interesting. So the correlation between diabetes and insulin and the brain. And so these are things, the recommendations that I'm seeing through the research and that I've outlined in the book are meant for your whole health, are meant to empower you to feel good in your body and in your brain. That's important.
I think it's important too. Let me ask you, I know that you are in one part of the United States, but if there are those who would like to get in touch with you, do you do telecounseling, or how does your practice work?
I do teleconferences. I do, Skype and phone sessions. It doesn't matter where somebody is at. I do consultations and coaching, and I help people look at how they're eating and how they feel and develop a plan that's sustainable for them based upon their particular needs. And my thing is education. If we can all be empowered through education, we can make informed choices about how we treat our body.
Yes.
And sometimes we need somebody to kind of coach us through that and distill all of the research and all of the competing information that's out there and distill it down in a way that works for our lifestyle. And so that's part of what I do in my private practice is, and I also offer classes and things of that nature, because I want to get the word out. I want to be of service, that there is hope, and that they often cite this quote by John Kennedy, and he said, "The time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining." It's time to start now, and that it is possible to lead a healthy, vital, inspired life, even if you have family members who are struggling with inflammatory conditions. You can help them by modeling to them. You can help yourself. And there is hope.
I absolutely agree with you. Francie, I want to give our audience an opportunity to be able to get in touch with you, and not only get in touch with you if they'd like a consultation or direct coaching, or to get involved with any of the things that you're doing, including a copy of your book. How can they do that?
Well, they can go to www.eattobeatalzheimers.com, and they can contact me through there. They can also go to, I have two websites, www.selfworthinaction.com. I have a newsletter that people can sign up for. They can contact me for, coaching sessions, find out, get recipes on my website, get brain health tips, and they can, as I said, there's a lot of different ways to get in touch with me, but a good place to start is through the Eat to Beat Alzheimer's website. You can go on Amazon and purchase my book, Eat to Beat Alzheimer's, and it's delicious recipes and new research to prevent and slow dementia, and The cookbook, as I was mentioning, really goes into detail about why it shows those ingredients and what the nutrition benefits are and how it serves your brain. So when you're making a recipe, you're also educating yourself. Wow, I'm having turmeric, and turmeric is an antioxidant, and it protects
Yes.
my brain. Like, so it makes more sense for people. So it's relatable. And that's important, because if we don't make it relatable, then we think it's something we just should do. You know, and the shoulds, to me, don't contribute to long-term wellness and health, because what happens is a judge enters. Well, if I don't do that, then I'm bad. Rather than a mindset of inspiration, of engagement, of excitement, which is deeply nourishing for our brain and our body.
I agree with you 100%. I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. I think you are just phenomenal. I would definitely love to have you back on the show again. And I'm just really excited to get the information out there. I have seen something recently, as you know, that this topic is so important and so crucial that we have people even in other countries that are beginning to develop specific communities for those that are suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia. And I just can't express enough at how important this particular topic is.
It is really important. And by way of example, 47.5 million people in the world have dementia. So Alzheimer's comprises 60 to 70% of dementia cases. And in the United States alone, we have 5.4 million people. And those are just people who have been diagnosed. We don't know about those who have not been diagnosed. And it's projected to rise to 14 million by 2050. So
Yes.
How we take care of people and how we take care of ourselves is really important in terms of quality of life.
I agree with you. Thank you so much for being on. And for those of you watching, really hope that you have an opportunity to get a copy of Francie Healey's book, Eat to Beat Alzheimer's, because this is not only something that is preventable for you, it can help others, but transformation in other areas by reducing inflammation is so crucial. So those of you who are maybe not even experiencing those around you who are seniors that are having symptoms of this, or please share this with your friends and family as well. Also utilize the things that you've learned here to make sure that you are healthy and that inflammation is being reduced in your system, because there are so many things that are absolutely treatable and reversible just based on our diet and nutrient intake and consumption alone. Thank you so much for watching today. This is Rebecca with Rebecca Sounds Reveille, and those of you who need to wake up, this is your reveille. Thanks for watching.